Hey everybody, welcome to It Tastes Different Gaming Appetizers. And what are we talking about tonight? Well, we're talking about Redfall. And what happened to Redfall? That's the $1,000,000 question. Because we all played, we reviewed Redfall, and Redfall was pretty bad. And so that's pretty much the consensus all around. So, one of the things that people, even including ourselves, have been wondering is what the hell happened during the development of this game that it's in this state. Well, now we have some news as to what went down. So basically, Arkane Austin is the studio that developed Redfall. They had previously done most of the work on Prey. And Prey, a lot of what Arkane makes is single player type games. And Prey was that as well. So basically, development for Redfall began in 2018 in Arkane Austin. At the time, ZeniMax was quietly looking to sell itself and was encouraging its studios, like Bethesda and its software and all that stuff that's under ZeniMax, to create games as a service projects such as Overwatch and various games as service games that were out at the time. Microtransactions were intensely encouraged. Arkane Austin, with co-directors Harvey Smith and Rico Bear, ultimately took this information and decided to make a multiplayer game about battling vampires and maybe paying for occasional cosmetic upgrades. And it was an opportunity to create a game with a broader market appeal after Prey did not do so well financially for them, right? I think review-wise and gamer-wise, it did pretty good, but it didn't sell a lot. It was actually, unfortunately, Prey was, compared to like Dishonored and stuff, did pretty bad for Arkane. That was why we haven't seen a new Prey in a while, right? Probably, maybe it never will. Hopefully. So Redfall was pitched as a multiplayer Arkane game. However, the problem is the development problems for Redfall started early. Firstly, management kept offering conflicting visions of what the game would and should be, resulting in the developer being confused about what they were creating. How to reconcile single player and multiplayer within an Arkane game was never really resolved either. Secondly, Arkane Austin employed fewer than 100 people, which had been enough to make a single player game like Prey, but was not a healthy number for developing a large multiplayer game with microtransactions to manage. So, outsourcing work to other studios was reportedly not enough to alleviate the strain, right? If you're going to create a giant multiplayer live, live service, games as a service type thing, you would need quite a healthy amount of employees to pull something like that off, because these games are huge, right? You can't have a small team create this gigantic lives as a service type game. It's just requires a lot of people to bring in all the different things to make a games as a service viable, right? Arkane needed new employees with experience in making multiplayer games, but since it hadn't announced Redfall yet, it was mostly getting applicants who wanted to make single player immersive sims such as Prey, Dishonored, things of that nature, right? So basically, as a result of plummeting morale and apparent lack of direction, veteran employees left the company during Redfall's development in droves, with about 70% of the staff who had worked on Prey ultimately leaving Arkane Austin. When Microsoft purchased ZeniMax back in September of 2022, there was hope that Microsoft could either right the ship or maybe even turn the game into a single player only type game, or possibly just kill the game off, right? But Microsoft stayed pretty hands off, allowing ZeniMax to retain autonomy for better or worse, which means that basically they just Microsoft just let them do what they wanted. And if you remember correctly, that first E3 or so after that, Redfall was the just one more thing game that they showed off. So it's unfortunate, probably for even at that time, for even Arkane Austin, to be like, oh, please don't put our game into this, because it wasn't, clearly they knew it was not going to turn out to be what it was, projected to gamers as it was going to be, right? So basically every problem that you would have imagined happened during development of the game. Reportedly, Redfall struggled so much during development that several people who played the game in 2021 were shocked to see how much little had changed up to launch. Meaning what they played back in 2021 is basically almost the same game that we got this year when the game launched. So not much had changed. So basically, yeah, the whole situation is, Arkane Studios is new, in Arkane Austin, they're known for making, and we talked about it before, I think Shane brought it up when we talked about the Redfall review, was Arkane's known about, they're known for making story-driven single-player experiences, not multiplayer games. So having a studio go into a multiplayer game, and especially a live games as a service, right? We'd already seen this before with Platinum Games, right? With Babylon's Fall. Platinum Games they make mainly single player games, right? Story-driven single player games is what they usually make. So to have a studio that's focused and basically that's all they know, turn to make a multiplayer, games as a service game, which is a whole different genre, a whole different thing for a development studio to do. It turns out like Babylon's Fall or like Redfall, right? Just pure trash, because they don't know how to do it. They don't have the employees or the focus of making something like that, because they've never done that before or even worked in multiplayer games, right? I mean, that was one of the biggest issues, is we need employees that know how to make a multiplayer game, right? We don't, it's like, we're trying to put this together, but we don't know how to make this stuff because we make single player experiences. And so, either, ZeniMax was, trying to ride the hype train, clearly, with because that was around the time that games as a service was really taking off and everybody was making games as a service and having all their studios make games as a service. You still see that today, but not as much as we used to see it, right? Because they've learned that, oh, wait, we have to have the right, development group to do this, because all these games as a services that came out around the same time that every company was making all died by the wayside because those studios didn't know what they were doing. So, a lot of the studio heads clearly learned some of their lesson with that and decided, let's shift focuses as it ain't working out. But for Arkane, it should have been the same thing. Microsoft, when they came in and bought them, should have either scrapped Redfall or had Arkane turn it into a single player game, right? I think if Redfall was turned into a single player experience, it probably would have, it definitely would have turned out a lot better than it is, right? Regardless. So let's go around and see what everybody thinks about this. Let's go to Shane first. Shane, what do you think about all this hubbub?
I am a huge fan of the Dishonored series, especially the first one. Second one, not as much, but it was still really good. I thought Prey was brilliant. I really, really liked the game. This is a piece of crap. And I like Phil Spencer. I like what he has done to the Xbox gaming division till now. I don't know who makes the final decision to say, okay, we're releasing it. That person made one of the biggest mistakes in Microsoft history in the last 5 years of Microsoft. They were on a roll of finally getting things kind of moving in the right direction. And this is a big hit. This was our big AAA BS game that I don't think any of us here had any high hopes, because it was a service game. And unfortunately, my hopes didn't get crushed because this game sucks. It's just not a good game. Arkane whoever made the decision at Arkane to, okay, let's entice investors, people that want to buy us by making a game we have no background, no pedigree, no idea truly how to do. and let's do that. Bad move. Bad move. The concept of the game is really interesting. I enjoy the concept. And honestly, when we played together, it's kind of enjoyable at times, but it's not a enjoyable game, especially by yourself. When Microsoft purchased them, and I'm not a billionaire who can buy people, so I may be wrong here, but if I was to buy a product to produce to people to sell, I think I would check the product. Now, I personally believe when you buy a company, when you buy a game developer, you try to be hands off as much as possible, but you also have to have a quality control too. You have to say, all right, the game can't be broken. The game has to have fun. The game has to be what we're saying it's going to be. That's not. I don't think that's a hard thing to do. I don't think it's disingenuous. I think it's a solid thing to do. Say, hey, I know you guys are working hard, but let's check it out. Make sure we're hitting all the bells and whistles. No problem. If they'd have done that, this game would have hit the market ever in this form. And the last person to say put it out there, he's to blame, plain and simple. It wasn't Arkane when they decided to make this stupid decision. It was the last person who said that stupid decision's fine. Let's do this. It's heartbreaking to see such a mistake happen. So, but Arkane's still a solid developer. At least they used to be. All their veterans have, a bunch of the veterans have left. So hopefully, some of these new hires will, be able to fill that void, fresh blood, and all that jazz. So I don't know. Microsoft made a huge mistake. Xbox gamers are devoted just like PlayStation, but this is one of those things that piss off a devotee. So what do you think, Pat? I mean, it's a big mess, big giant turd mess.
I don't know if anybody was really excited for Redfall. I sure wasn't. I mean, it didn't look like a game I really wanted to play anyway, looking at the screens and everything. But I mean, to some extent, I kind of understand where Microsoft came from. We bought them because they were doing good. We didn't buy them because they were a failing company. So we're buying them because they make stuff everybody wants to play. So I think even Phil has been like, we want them to do what they've been doing, and so we have to trust them to do what they've been doing. And unfortunately, that trust kind of bit the hand that feeds them a little bit, but at the same time, if all this stuff is true and they were way understaffed for even making a single player game, which you need way more staff for a multiplayer or a games of service game than what these people had. And if they were all comprised of pretty much not very many, veteran game makers, especially not to mention, non-veteran game makers, but non-game makers of games of service or multiplayer. Now, at some point, there's always the first in every genre, right? There's the first of every, there's the first people to come out with the battle arena style game, et cetera, et cetera. But that's an outlier, right? That's not everybody. Everybody doesn't come out with that originally. And then everybody copies that and be like, I want to make my own version of that with X, Y, Z. So some part of me goes, I can understand where Microsoft position was and not wanting to micromanage them and let them do what they bought them to do. But then again, part of me has to sit there and go, I find it very hard to believe that as big of a gamer as Phil Spencer is, he had not played that game before it released and didn't say, what the fuck, what is this? I find that hard to believe. And if it was me and it was my company, I'm like, we can't release this. We cannot, unless Phil Spencer picked it up, played like 5 minutes and be like, yeah, not my game, but looks good. Looks all right, whatever. Because if you spend 5 minutes in the game, you don't do anything. Okay, cool. You don't get any of the meats and potatoes and issues of the game, right? So for me, it was a really bad game. Even if all the bugs weren't there, the game just doesn't have any enjoyment for me. It's not that fun. The co-op is the only thing fun, and the only reason it's fun is because it's with my friends and we're BSing the whole time. We're not actually playing the game. We're giving each other a hard time and trying to get the other person killed half the time, So it's not like we're playing the game as intended. We're screwing around more often than not, So, but for me, it wasn't a game that was high on my list, but it feels very sad. I feel very sad for Microsoft because they're just pumping out lemons here lately, right? Lemons and unpolished turds. We're not even talking about the shiny kind that were polished. We're talking about just turds. I feel bad for them. Spent all that money on ZeniMax. What's going to happen if they actually get the Activision Blizzard contract, and then what they're going to put out? More turds? Unpolished turds, you know?
Wow turds.
Wow turds. Because they already missed out on the Diablo 4, you know? They don't own them. So, but it's all good. It helps their stock and everything because they already have their buy-in price locked. So if the stock does better, then hey, whatever. It's more money for them. But to me, it's a combination. You let a very amateur team, lead the development of something that's supposed to be games of service. Well, and it sounds like the game direction changed a few times, right? One person thought it was going to be this, and they thought it was going to be that. Then they were told they needed microtransaction type stuff, and now it's like, Microsoft bought them, and they're like, you can dump that crap. We don't want it. We don't care. And so they had to revamp, rechange, and then looks like not a lot of progress was made when they lost a mass amount of their veteran people. I'm sure the veteran people saw the writing on the wall and jumped ships like rats from a sinking ship, you know? And they should have vetted the people they were onboarding more instead of hiring a bunch of people dedicated to single player game. Look for some people that may had some worked on this multiplayer or this game to service game or something, you know, been a little bit more picky with their hiring process, but that's just me. Maybe it was slim pickings. I mean, it was during the COVID time, but I think, everybody was working remote. I'm pretty sure even they were, so they could have found the people they needed. But that's just me. I have no clue what was going on in that studio. All I know is that they put out a very uninteresting game with a bunch of issues and crap. And Phil Spencer, I guarantee you, played that game. And I wonder what his real thoughts are, but he'll never say because he's not the guy since I've seen him, he's not the guy to publicly admonish or flog any of his studios for putting out anything. He's like, hey, if this is the vision they envisioned, it didn't quite hit the mark. He's never mean about it or rude or just downright a jerk about it. But sometimes that may need to happen, right? He needs to be admonishing the leadership of this game and being like, what did you guys do? What have you been doing for the last year and 2 years, this game? And then, unfortunately, it sounds like some changes need to happen if they, or worst case worse is that the studio gets shut down and people shuffle to other studios. But yeah, I don't know.
It makes you wonder, they don't have an experience. Arkane didn't have the experience of a big online presence. When they got bought up by Microsoft, they should have been knocking on all those doors. I mean, there's many developers at Microsoft that do multiplayer. I mean, you got the Coalition, you got 353. I mean, you got the developers who do the Horizon, Forza,
Playground,
Turn 10. Was it Playground or Turn 10? I can't remember.
I think it's Playground, isn't it?
But either way, they have lots of resources to talk to. So, get some advice, hey, I mean, those games ain't games of service, but they're online, they're massive games. So you think they could have got some, points and tips, but, I'm not a tech guy. I don't know. I just know a big Redfall turd when I played one, and I played one and wasn't happy with it.
Well, I guess the question should be asked, did they actually raise the red flag and say, hey, we need help? Or did their management did the lower staff say that, and then the management or mid-management, upper management just stonewall all that and not let it get past them into Microsoft? If that's the case, then your mid-management, upper management need to be let go because they caused this by not being truthful with their bosses. So you need to find out where in the chain this was broke. If it was brought up internally with staff and never made it past that level to Microsoft to say, hey, we need help with this, then there needs to be some changes. But if nothing was ever brought up to anybody, then it's on them. I don't care if you have supposed to have 100 people and you only have 30. That's on you. You need to come to the people who are your leaders and be like, we can't do this, and I don't know if that happened. I wasn't there. It could have or could not have happened, but it's all hearsay really at this point, right?
Yep. But I hear people say that game sucks, so somebody's at fault.
Well, I didn't hear it. I seen it.
I'm a witness.
Take a big bite of that turd. Sink your fangs into it.
It's a wow turd.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it's unfortunate. I think the game ultimately should have just been scrapped. And then Arkane Austin, just reboot something new, create a new game, right? Because it sounds like the game was initially, ZeniMax wanted them to create a multiplayer lives of service game, and game directors at the time came up with this concept, and that's what they were going to do with it for a company that, for a studio that doesn't know how to do that, right? And so I think once ZeniMax was out of the picture, right, once Microsoft bought their studios and everything, then Arkane Austin should have said, okay, cool, scrap this game, let's move on to something else, and that should have been the end of it, right? But again, like Pat said, we weren't there, so we don't know what the ins and outs of things that happened and why this came to release. I mean, this game, regardless of what you think or anything to that effect, Redfall should have never been released. It should have never seen the light of day in the state that it is today, right? I mean, it just not only reflects badly for Arkane Austin, but it also reflects badly for Microsoft, right? And Pat's right. They've been doing nothing but releasing lemons lately. And even though they've turned it around with their console, and with Game Pass, which is, their console's great and Game Pass is great, but they have nothing else going for them right now other than that. They own a lot of studios, but we don't get a lot of things that just wow us on the Xbox, right? We do on the PlayStation, we do on the Switch. We don't, the Xbox right now is the multi-platform device. That's all it is.
It's the white bread of video game developers right now. It's just plain.
Yeah, it's plain. It's the plain yogurt. Not the flavored kind. Not the kind that you can sprinkle.
In my yogurt?
Yeah, not the ones that come with the little chocolate chunks that you can throw in there. Nope, this is just plain. Not even vanilla. It's just plain yogurt.
Not even granola?
Not even granola. Doesn't even have the flavor. It's just plain Greek yogurt. It just tastes like sour grapes.
It's not even Greek. It's Oklahoma yogurt.
Not even from Greece. So yeah, I mean, and it's unfortunate. Like, we've talked about this before, and I'll end it on this. June 11th is Microsoft's E3-ish. They're not going to be at E3, but it's their showcase. They really need to wow us. We talked about PlayStation's. PlayStation's was fine. It didn't wow us or anything, but PlayStation doesn't need to wow their crowd. They don't need to wow their fans or people that are on the fence thinking about getting a PlayStation, right? They've already gotten those people. So PlayStation right now, they're in the position where they can just throw fluff in the air and everyone goes, ooh, fluff. Microsoft does that and they go, come on, Microsoft. What's all this fluff here? It's all over the place. That's the difference right now. So Microsoft really has to bring it and, bring the gold and platinum fluff out there for everybody. Otherwise, this might be, if Microsoft has nothing to show, if Starfield is even bad, right? If we see Starfield and everyone's like, then you might as well say possibly the end of an Xbox from that point on, right? You can't, I mean, they would probably release another console, but I mean, I think the sales would be even worse than they are now. If they can't get something out the door that, they're in third place, and they always have been. They have been for a few years now, or I guess since forever, right? They're in the 360, they were in first, but then PlayStation 3 ended up beating them anyway. But if people, they saw a resurgence with the Series X and Phil Spencer coming into place, but that resurgence is starting to dwindle because we're not getting anything from it, right? The fans are not getting what they want. So Microsoft really has to bring the heat. Otherwise, the next time around, the Xbox Series Y or whatever the case may be may have half the sales that the Xbox Series X has, right? And if they continue down that road, the Xbox XY, the one after that, ain't going to see crap, right? It's just going to continue to go down to where Microsoft, to where they'll eventually, you know, if Microsoft goes that route, where they'll eventually make it to where Xbox is just Game Pass. You just download it on whatever you want, your TV, your computer, you know, what your PlayStation maybe even, and you can play Game Pass on there, and that's all Xbox is at that point. So it becomes just Netflix, literally. It just becomes Netflix. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents. I mean, I'm hoping June 11th. It just blows me out of the water. Do you guys have anything else you want to add?
No, I'm sad now. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, let us know down in the comments below. What do you all think? Have you played Redfall? What do you think of Redfall? What do you think of the whole situation at Arkane Austin? Let us know down in the comments below. You know, do you think Arkane Austin will be around to make another game? I mean, I haven't heard of their closure or anything, so I'm assuming they're moved on to some other new franchise, maybe Prey 2 or something else that they're going to be working on. Maybe going back to single player games at this point. I don't know if we'll see a Prey 2, but we might. Who knows? I mean, that's still a franchise that they could do something really cool with, right? That could get more people into it. I thought the concept, and I liked Prey. I didn't think it was like a super great game. I'm not a big fan of Arkane, so I think all their games are kind of eh. But I like the idea of Prey. I like the concept. It was really cool. So, you know, they could do something with that. But let us know down in the comments below. Other than that, thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure to like the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Do us a favor, hit that subscribe button. It's free. I can't believe it. It's still free. What the heck? And also make sure to hit the bell notification to stay up to date with new videos that we do all the time. We'll see you next time.
See ya.